Okay, so we're going to go ahead. Can I have the board of directors come on up? And as our board's coming up to do your introductions, Jules, if you can come up first. I do want to mention one thing, you guys. So our memberships, we send out our membership renewals twice a year. And we just sent out our membership renewals. If you haven't renewed your membership, or if you're not a member and you want to join, there's applications in the back. But when you get your renewal, there is an option that you can go ahead and sign up. Sean. So there is an option on the membership renewal where you can go ahead and just mark a box, and it'll automatically hit your account once a year. And so you can pay on either a credit card, you can pay on any major credit card through PayPal, or you can still write a check and send it to us. But membership is important, and it's not a lot of money, you guys. So if you haven't renewed, please do. We just sent out the renewal. We had a great response, but I see a couple of faces here that I don't think you guys sent your checks. So please do. Also, before we start, come on up, Jules. I also want to, is Linda and Marty still here? Linda, Marty? No, they're not here. Anyway, they're the folks, they're not on our board, but they're volunteers. They're here every single meeting, and they are in the back. Usually they're the ones that take your money, so maybe they left and are in Vegas. So Jules is just going to make an announcement. He's as you all know, the honorary mayor of Sherman Oaks, and also on our board. So Jules wants to thank the restaurant of the month, which is the Sherman.
Do you all know about the Sherman? Okay. Well, that's a pretty good restaurant, and they made a good meal for us tonight. We want to thank them very much for their support and all their effort in giving us a good dinner. So, you know, there's some people here that I need to recognize, if you don't mind, Matt.
Do I have a choice?
No. Dee Gelb, where are you?
She's hiding.
Dee, stand up, please. I want you to know, do you remember the Hughes Market on Van Nuys Boulevard? Do you know why we got a Gelson's? Dee Gelb. She knew the president of Gelson's and convinced them. Bertie? Oh. Anyway, great job. So, I do community outreach now, and I get myself into trouble a lot. But I'm always picking on the city for not doing their job. And we did get rid of all the news racks, thank goodness. And we're working on the parking meters that you can't read. So let's see what happens there. So maybe Adrin can do something about that.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Weitzler. I'm the secretary of the board, also on the committee for the airports and Buckley School. So if you have any issues about either one of those things, please feel comfortable coming up and talking to me about it. And as far as D in the used market, I sort of have mixed feelings about that, because when I was, well, it was a couple of years ago, I was a box boy at a used market. So I hated to see them go.
Did she take your job away from you?
I'm Maria Pavlov-Calvin, and I'm the legislative chair.
Hi, I'm Bob Anderson. I'm vice president and the chair of the transportation committee.
Bob's also our technical genius. My name is Marshall Long. I'm land use chair along with Tom, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tom Glick with Marshall, Land Use and Planning. We co-chair.
All right.
What about the art thing?
Oh, and the art thing, but we're going to do the art thing separately. We got one quote.
Sean Kurzweil.
You gotta hold it up to your mouth.
Sean Kurzweil. I'm on the airport committee and the homelessness committee.
All right.
Hi, my name is Larry Slade, and I'm the chair of the homelessness committee for the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association.
Hi, I'm John Eisen. I'm treasurer of the SOHA.
Okay, that is your board of directors. And folks, if you guys have any issue, if you have any passion, you want to join any of these committees, just go up to these folks. They're very friendly, and we're here to keep Sherman Oaks the great place that it is. Okay, so we got through that. Okay, our senior leads, come on up.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Officer Saldana, and I cover the southern portion of Sherman Oaks. I just want to remind everybody that 4th of July is around the corner, and it's a very busy day for us. Please, when you guys report something, you actually see somebody lighting up fireworks, or you know the exact location where it's occurring. Don't just report, I heard it, a couple blocks or stuff like that. Our 911 system is very overloaded. So it's very hard, and I was talking to a gentleman here, just calling on non-emergency numbers are between an hour hold for that. So just to remember, that's going to be one of our busiest days. Second, Sherman Oaks is still looking very good on crime. We're still low on property crime and violent crime. We do, however, in the last 24 hours, because the summer is getting hotter out there, we had 3 homicides. 2 on Victory and Coldwater, and 1 on Sepulveda and Sherman. I'll let Sepulveda and Sherman. Sherman. Yes.
And I have the same crime stats as Slow Saldana, basically Sherman Oaks, but I do want to talk about a certain ADW shooting that occurred on June 17th at the 4600 block of Noble. 56 casings were recovered. I expect that in Afghanistan, not here in Sherman Oaks. When I read it, I was like, is this a typo? 56 casings were recovered.
Yeah, 2 of them were with my daughter's car.
Yes, 4600 block of Noble. A group of individuals they rented a residence there in the area, short-term rental. We're not sure if it was an Airbnb or what type of rental, but in our records, we cannot see anything when it comes to that specific property. They were going to do some kind of music project, a vehicle, 2000s Mercedes, black gray, of color. We don't have a license plate. We don't have any other details. Went up to the victims, and witnesses state that the suspects had a large, possible rifle-looking firearm. It wasn't an AK-47. Those rounds are 223, so they're a little bit longer. The rounds that were recovered are shorter, about a 9mm, but still it was 56 rounds. Asking the public if you guys have any evidence, any type of information that you guys can provide us, please contact our detectives. And I'm going to give you guys a phone number. The phone number is 818-374-0400. 818-374-0040. My apologies. 0040. And ask to speak to Detective Holmberg. He is working tremendously on this investigation. We don't see this very often here in Sherman Oaks. Like my partner was stating, we had 2 shootings, 3 victims that passed away in the 24 hours. So if you guys have any information, please, let's try to get these bad guys off the street.
Where's the 4700 block?
46.
46.
Just
Noble.
Moore Park and Cameron.
Just south of the freeway, the 101.
Yes. One more thing, please save the date, Tuesday, August 1st, 6 p.m. We're having our National Night Out. I want to give a shout out to Tammy from the Sherman Oaks Chamber, Susan Collins from the neighborhood public safety, Penny from neighborhood council. They're all working together to organize this event. It's going to be at the Rolfs on Ventura and Hazeltine, Tuesday, August 1st at 6 p.m. Please stop by, say hello. It's a good way to interact with business owners, community members, and the police and everyone else who comes and support this event. Tuesday, August 1st.
Thank you. Let's have a big round of applause for our senior leads. Thank you. So next up, can I get the field deputies come on up? Brian, since you're running up here, we'll get you up here first. So any other field deputies? Okay. Actually, Lindsay, we're going to get you, I told you originally, come on, Ryan. I told you originally after Ryan, but I'm changing the order, so you'll be after the field deputies.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Nazarian. I am the Sherman Oaks Field Deputy for Councilmember Nithya Raman. I hope you all noticed the wonderful, colorful postcards on your tables. The Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, in partnership with Council District 4 and Rec and Parks, is hosting a movie night for its annual summer movies in the park. It's going to be this Saturday at this park. It's going to be at the fields just off of Hazeltine and Houston. Join us for Guardians of the Galaxy viewing. It will pre-show entertainment begins at 6 p.m. and then the movie begins at dusk, so about 8:30, I believe. I also wanted to promote the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council's Human Services Committee Senior Hygiene Drive. Unfortunately, there are folks in our community who are seniors and are also in need of hygiene products. So we are going to be hosting this event actually here. It's going to be at the Senior Center this Saturday, June 24th from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. We are collecting flushable wipes, adult diapers, body wash. All of this will be collected and distributed to seniors who are in need. A couple of other things. City Council passed its budget, which was signed by the mayor. This is the largest amount of money that has been authorized for homelessness spending. Just a few years ago, we were spending $130 million on homelessness, but this past budget reflected $1.3 billion with a B, so that we can actually eliminate homelessness and get people off our streets and into housing. A couple of other things I wanted to mention: $48 million in gang reduction and youth development, $3 million to implement the council members' comprehensive RV citywide strategy to getting RVs off our streets and get those residents housed. $260,000 for additional catch basins in Sherman Oaks. We saw how bad the storm was earlier this year, so we need additional catch basins. And then finally, $2 million, which will support 5,000 trees cut around our city. If you might have noticed, signalized crosswalks on Ventura have been activated after many years of advocacy and construction by this committee. I'm sorry, by this community, not committee, this community. 2 signalized crosswalks, you'll have noticed them at Ventura and Calhoun and Ventura and Columbus. There's one final one left to be activated. It'll be done in a couple of weeks, and that will be at Ventura and Lamona. Finally, I wanted to just mention, if you are an avid tennis player like John Eisen and some other folks who are here, Tammy, Bill, our tennis courts at the park right over here have been resurfaced. They've been repainted, the fence is new, all of it smells like a brand new car. So anyway, I'll be here for this evening. That was a long report. If you would like my contact information, I have business cards, and I want to stay in touch with you. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Sophia Sudani. I'm the Supervisor Horvath's office. I think my colleague Myrna had come last meeting, so I'm happy to be here with you all today. Some updates from our office. As Brian had mentioned, homelessness is one of our big priorities here at the office. And just some updates from us, from the board. The board has received a series of updates on beds available in LA County, including treatment beds, psychiatric beds, interim housing, permanent housing, board, and care. And as of June 6th, at the board meeting, they focused on Measure H funded beds in total, because we are fiscally responsible and wanted to get those numbers to you guys. Measure H funded beds, we have 44,000 beds with 13,000 in progress, and these beds are tackling homelessness on the ground. I will say we've been partnering with our sheriffs, with our LAPD, outreach workers, and our city partners to try to get people housed as soon as possible. We had some Inside and Safe efforts that we've done at the Chatsworth train station in Venice and throughout LA County, and we're happy to be bringing those services on the ground here. A couple other resources I did want to share with you guys. If you are a Medi-Cal recipient, please renew your application. We're here today. If you need help renewing your application, please do reach out. Also, LA County's Guaranteed Income Program has expanded to 200 DCFS foster youth between the ages of 21 and 23. It's $1,000 a month for 2 years. That application just opened and will be closing on July 3rd. So please reach out if you know anyone that might be eligible. And then last but certainly not least, we have a new website that's up and running, so please do check that out. And if you are a nonprofit or any organization that wants to apply for discretionary funds, that application is live, and I'm happy to walk you through it. But I will be here for the meeting as well, so feel free to stop on by. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry, it sounds like you're gonna have to find a new committee. Come on. I mean, it sounds like, $1 billion for the city homeless, more homes, and you've got all these extra beds. Sounds like homeless is solved.
Hello, my name is Diane Rana. I was here and introduced by Sebastian with Assemblymember Friedman's office last month. I'll keep my update brief. The Assemblymember has passed 18 bills out of the Assembly and onto the Senate. One of them will be a 2-year bill, but the rest we hope continue to move forward through the legislative process. This past Saturday, the Assembly members spoke at the Art Director Guild's first Sustainability Symposium, encouraging the entertainment industry to become more environmentally friendly. The office continues to help constituents with various cases, mostly EDD as the Writers Guild strike continues. The district office is keeping in touch with Caltrans to coordinate efforts for cleanups and customer service requests. If you ever put a customer service request into Caltrans through their website, and it has been more than 30 days and you have not seen the work completed, or if you get a notice that the case has been closed, but you know that the work has not been completed, please reach out to Assemblymember Laura Friedman's office. We're meeting with Caltrans monthly to follow up on those customer service requests.
Awesome, thank you. All right. Lindsay from the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council.
Thank you, everyone. Lindsay Ember, President of the Neighborhood Council. As Ryan said, we have movie on Saturday. We also have elections. I should center it for the Zoom audience. Hi, everyone online. It's going to be in this room tomorrow. And we have 3 of the areas. Jeffrey has been passing out cards telling you everything about the election. Yes? Not in this room. Building C. Building C. All right. Building C. So it's just across the way from here, but it's in the same general vicinity. Please vote. The democratic process is super important. If you have any questions about the movie, I'm also the new newsletter editor for our council. And if you have any story ideas that you'd like to, as a public service announcement, include as part of the newsletter, send me an email. My business cards are on the tables. Thank you.
Is the movie The Guardians, is that the new one or the original one? The first one? Or? Okay, thank you. Okay, just wanted to know. Okay, we are moving through. We're going to have a couple of committee reports, and then we're going to go ahead and get to our featured speaker.
And Nick Schultz.
Oh.
He's on. Hi.
Come on up.
All right.
I didn't see you over there.
That's okay.
Okay, after that, Larry Slade, and then Maria, and then Bob.
Hey, thank you very much. Perfect, okay. Well, hi everyone. My name is Nick Schultz. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes tonight. I'm the Vice Mayor of Burbank, and if you're scratching your head saying, why the heck is he here talking to us tonight? We are talking about election season. I am running to succeed my friend and my mentor, Laura Friedman, as the representative for Assembly District 44 in next year's election. And I really just wanted to start the conversation tonight by coming out and introducing myself to all of you. The things that you should really know about me are this. First in my family to go and graduate from college, I work as a prosecutor at the California Department of Justice, where I prosecute human trafficking, labor trafficking, public corruption, white-collar crime, and all sorts of organized crime that we see across the state of California. In 2020, my wife and I, before that, we bought a home. We were raising our 2 kids in Burbank. And I ran for city council because I saw our community, just like the community right here in Sherman Oaks, struggling. I saw businesses shuttering and folks at risk of losing their home. And in a little over 2 years on the city council, we've done an awful lot. We doled out over $1 million in direct assistance to our business community, and I'll tell you, it has never been better to do business in the city of Burbank. We are at a time when we're seeing homelessness rampant across the region. We have seen a nearly 10% decline in our unhoused population based on the initiatives that we're taking. And last but not least, crime is up across Los Angeles County, and yet we are seeing reductions in categories of crime based on the steps that we're taking. So I bring all that up to say, and I have to say it's very serendipitous to be here with the guest speaker tonight, someone who held this seat and fought so hard for this community and delivered results across the district, Assemblymember Nazarian, of course, and our next member of the LA City Council. I can only hope to follow in his huge footsteps that he's leaving, but I hope to do so with your help, and I'm running for one reason, because this district deserves a champion and someone who's going to deliver results. So I'll be back. I look forward to talking with all of you, but if you want to reach me in the meantime, you can call or text, and I'll say my number twice. And this is my personal cell. It's 818-806-9392. Again, it's 818-806-9392, or you can visit votemegschultz.com, and I look forward to having lots of conversations with all of you in the months ahead. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Larry and then Maria.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm the chair of the Homelessness Committee, and I want to give you a report, and I thought that the best thing for me to do tonight would be to give you just a little bit of information and then ask for a little bit of feedback. So what I want to first start by saying is that we've had a couple of people come up tonight and talk about the allocations in the city, the county, and the state budget to address the issue of homelessness. And there can be no question that the state of California is throwing billions and billions of dollars at the problem. The new mayor has come in with a tremendous amount of energy towards addressing the homelessness problem. She declared a state of emergency, and she has been very active in the process of trying to address the issue. I'm curious to see how well this is going to work, how effective can government be, what can we do? Is it a matter of allocating money? Are we coming up with creative enough solutions? And are we able to keep up with the demand, the constant inflow of homeless onto our streets in the city of Los Angeles? So we are in a position now where we have the time and the attention of the elected officials in Los Angeles to this issue. They're allocating a lot of money. A lot of our tax dollars are going towards this, and it's going to take time before we can tell whether or not it's going to work. But here's the part I want to ask you about. There have been a lot of efforts going on, specifically in Sherman Oaks, to address the homelessness problem. The issues here have been featured on national news and national television. My question for you is, by a show of hands, how many of you have seen an impact of the efforts being made by our government and local service providers to mitigate the problem of homelessness? Has it gotten any better? Can you raise your hand if you think it's gotten better somewhat? Now let me be clear, I'm not talking about has the problem gone away, but have you noticed any improvements? I have very few hands up, a couple of hands up. Have you noticed any clearing of any encampments in Sherman Oaks? Anybody see any of that going on?
And then they come back, though.
No, I'm just trying to gauge. Yes, it's a cyclical thing. I just wondered what you guys thought. So my impression is that notwithstanding everything that's going on so far, you have yet to feel the impact in your lives and in our community. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
One bit of information. Today, a homeless man was climbing over the fence at Milliken Middle School, which isn't called Milliken anymore. It's called Louis Armstrong. A naked homeless man was arrested. So, just in case you didn't know.
Now you know.
Now you know. All right. Happy to share the good news.
So I do a lot of the housing issues, and if you've been following me on my newsletter articles, you know that we've been focused on how the city planning department is going to rezone LA. We know by the city's own data that we can add enough housing on our commercial corridors and public lands to exceed the state mandate without touching our single-family or multifamily neighborhoods. But currently, the city is not excluding these neighborhoods from being rezoned. Last time the council member was here, she gave us verbal support that she will protect our neighborhoods and make sure that we enforce the building on our commercial corridors. But she has not yet agreed to send a directive to the planning department stating her position, and her word to the planning department matters. So we need her to stand up for our communities. Meanwhile, we continue to organize a lot of CD4 neighbors and all our communities in the valley and on the west side so that we can get maps together and meet up with all their council members so we can tell them that we can do this housing without ruining neighborhoods. So, interesting development. Last week, we actually had the planning department reach out to us and ask us to join them with our community groups and have a conversation. That is all we've always wanted, but it is a city agency, so we're not sure this is going to happen. But while we're away, I will keep you informed through newsletters what's going on with Councilmember Rahman and with anything with the planning department.
Thank you, Maria. She does an amazing job fighting for us as far as, thank you, Maria. Bob, and then after Bob is Fran and or Tom. Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Just a little update on Metro. You know, you think you read everything and you know what's going on. And I've always known that all the sales tax you pay, Metro gets a half cent of that. What I didn't realize when I started looking into it a couple of weeks ago is that they don't get a half cent, they get 2 cents. Because there's 4 measures, and each measure gives Metro a half a cent. And these measures never end. If you've got grandkids, they're going to be paying it when they're 100 years old. And it turns out we give in our sales tax to Metro $4.5 billion a year. And then they take about another $4 billion from our California state income tax and our federal taxes. So they get about almost $9 billion a year from us. Now you think they'd be nice and open and want to talk to us. They're the opposite. They won't say a damn thing to anybody. A friend of mine asked them somewhat nicely for some information, and they said, we won't give that to you. He asked him if this was Russia today, and we moved. He didn't realize he'd moved. But so he sued him because he happens to be the founder of Ticketmaster and has a few bucks, and told him, I'll just shut you down. So Metro is trying to stifle a lawsuit and is not providing documents that we've requested. And the documents are actually due this Friday. Metro gave themselves 5 or 6 unilateral extensions to deliver the documents without telling anybody. And we don't think they'll deliver anything Friday. But it's being worked on, and once we start to get some things, Metro's gonna start to have to give us information. And, but it's a pretty sad situation. They're spending our money and they keep us in the dark like a mushroom. And that's it. So, but don't worry, we'll keep on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Fran, Tom? I only have one mic, sorry.
Well, on that happy note, let's talk about something that's more fun. I'm Fran Kersner. I'm the president of the Sherman Oaks Chamber Foundation. For those of you who don't know, we're the ones that paint all the utility boxes throughout Sherman Oaks. It's a really fun project. We've been doing it since 2017. We've painted over 100 of them. And it's a totally volunteer organization, and it works entirely on donations. We get some great support from Nithya Raman's office from CD4, but the rest of it comes from you. So if you'd like us to keep painting, we need your help. We are holding a fundraiser on August 26th. I have a little flyer here to save the date. It's in conjunction with a store called Hammer and Stain. And it's a really fun place where you can take your kids and you go paint in something. And it's kind of like Color Me Mine, but with wood. And then part of the proceeds is going to go back to the foundation. And we're going to have 2 sessions. One's an all ages event, so you can bring your kids, your grandkids, and just have a fun afternoon. And then there's an over 21 session, which will have booze. So pick your poison. And we have flyers here, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.
And we will be sending an email blast out with this flyer to all members, and then another flyer is being prepared that will have the registration, have the payment information, and all the information. So please, it's a really fun. It's a great. I mean, you guys see what this organization is doing around our neighborhood. I love it. Every time I see one of those, it makes me smile stuck in traffic.
Thanks, guys. All right, that is our committee reports. I have one question for you guys. Just a show of hands, how many people here live south of Ventura Boulevard? Okay. How many of you guys know about a new legislation that's being worked on right now called the wildlife prevention? Okay. So there was this little initiative, or this little legislation that was talked about by our council member, as well as one other council member who was introduced to Plum. And it started off to protect the wildlife, which everybody here would love to protect our wildlife. This is now morphed. Yesterday there was a hearing in front of Plum, and this has morphed now to restrict what you can do south of Ventura Boulevard between 405 and Hollywood Hills, and south of the boulevard to Sunset Boulevard, basically. And it's going to reduce what you can do in your home. If you want to enlarge your home at a later date, you cannot build a basement. How does that protect the wildlife? If you want to go ahead and you can only build single-family homes, or I'm sorry, single-story homes, how does that protect the wildlife? So this was kind of, it was a kind of a quiet deal that kind of went in front of Plum yesterday in a completely different form than how it was originally introduced. So this association is going to go ahead and continue to go ahead and give you guys some updates on it, because my phone the last 2 days has not stopped ringing by really pissed off homeowners, builders, just everybody, people in Encino, because they're saying this, if it's coming here, it's going to come to us next. And so anyway, we'll keep you posted. So I just wanted to see how many of you guys actually knew about it. By a show of hands, it was like 2. So that's not a good thing. Okay, so we're going to start. So I have known Adrin. I call him Adrin, but he refers to himself as Adrin. Adrin. How do you pronounce it?
Adrin.
No, it's not. Okay. Anyway, I've known this man for a while, and I used to see him. I used to see him downtown in City Hall and wandering the halls. I didn't know who he was. Actually, I thought he was a homeless guy. And then I really got to know him well. No, I'm just kidding. I got to know him well when he was our assembly member up in Sacramento, which he had been for the last 10 years until he got turned back. And so when we invited him here earlier this year, we booked these our featured speakers early on. I was really excited to hear from him as far as, now that he's not in the state house anymore, to kind of give us a state of the state as far as what an insider who's now outside kind of point of view as far as, how's our governor doing? How's our government doing with all the trillions of extra dollars that we got during COVID, and just all the measures that we've passed as far as homeless? How's that working out? Just an insider's view on that. So we're going to hear about that, but I wanted to share is when I started this morning when I woke up, and I was like, wait a second, I know he's done more than just our assembly member, but I couldn't remember exactly what, and I couldn't remember what he was doing in City Hall all those years that I would see him. So I started digging, and I just want to tell you guys a little bit about this man. So again, he was in the assembly for the last 10 years. He served as a staffer for multiple San Fernando Valley elected officials, including a field representative to Congressman Brad Sherman, deputy to Paul Koretz, deputy to Councilmember Tom LaBonge, chief of staff for current council president Paul Krikorian, and for 6 years he ran that office. Adrin also worked for two California governors, Gray Davis oh yeah, I guess the current one, Newsom. I have a tough time saying that name. And he serves as a board member on the Employment Relations Board for Governor Newsom currently. While he was in our legislature, he passed 72 bills that were signed into law by Governor Brown and Newsom, and he brought significant amount of funding for transportation in the Valley, as well as funding established for after-school learning centers here in the Valley, the Tumo Technology Center, and he also created the Cal Kids program for children's college savings plans, which now Governor Newsom invested $1.8 billion. So he's done a lot. So I'm really excited. Come on up. I'm really excited to have him and to be able to hear about what he thinks the state of California. But the one other thing that I do want to share with you, the reason I changed chairs, by the way, is because this one's broken. I didn't want you sitting in this one. No, this one's broken. That's okay. So in between the time that I invited him here and now, he is now an official candidate for you. It's official, right?
It is.
Okay. So Paul Krikorian, who is our current president of the council, is turned out, and he's running for his seat. So it's not in this district, but it's our neighbor. Sherman Oaks Studio City is kind of the same. Not really. Sherman Oaks is a lot better. But so anyway, he's going to be running for Krikorian's seat in next year's election on that too. So we can maybe, if there's some questions from you guys on that, but let's hear a little bit about you, and then we've got a handful of questions from the audience that were emailed in, and then we'll go ahead and hopefully have some time for questions.
Thanks, Matt. It's wonderful to be with all of you. I would make a habit of coming in annually after a session would be completed in September and give you a quick update on the state of the state and then take questions. And I would almost always have someone asking me about whether or not I'm destroying Prop 13. That was a question that would come up every single year. So Prop 13 was not destroyed, but I still got to tell you folks, I said this when I ran for office, and I'm going to say it again, it does need to adjust in order to protect individual homeowners, but make sure that corporations who don't have a date of expiration, whose lives do not, as an entity, have a date of expiration, need to pay their fair share of taxes. So we'll continue that conversation on an ongoing basis. But I gotta say, first and foremost, it's a wonderful pleasure to be here with all of you. And I'll say more about this later on towards the end, but I have to also say thank you for the opportunity to allow me to serve you for the last 10 years. It's been a wonderful experience to be able to be grilled in front of you here, sweat it out a little bit, and come to a resolution of having the opportunity to listen to you, take a lot of meetings in the office to understand the concerns and where they're coming from, and figure out solutions for long-term sustainable purposes. So on that note, thank you, Matt. You did a great job already making the introduction, and so you took half of my talking points. So I'll just, I just want to talk to you a little bit about just how I started in the legislature, where it went, and just a few key points for us to consider moving forward as we want to make sure that we strengthen our democracy and the tenets of the democracy that help us have elected officials. I'm not moving out of Los Angeles. I'm not going to leave California. So it's important to me now, even as a former elected. I don't know if I'm going to have the opportunity to serve or not. That's going to be dependent on the voters of CD2. But as a resident, it's going to be critical for me to understand, to figure out how I'm going to be able to provide better opportunities for my 3 children, 12, 10, and 5. So you all know I'm not retiring anytime soon. Whether it's college, and for them to be able to pay for it, or for me to help pay for it, and then job opportunities after that, as well as then making sure that they get into a small nest, whether it's a condo, whether it's ownership of some sort, somewhere where they get vested in the community. Because we need to make sure more and more people also transition from rental into ownership in order to make sure that people are vested in their communities. That's key. So I say that, by the way, being a renter majority of my life. So it's perfectly, that's how we start, but at some point we become vested in our communities. So in the 10 years, I just want to give you a quick glimpse of what happened in the 10 years since I ran for office. 2012, I ran for office. Our state budget was $155 billion. It had increased by about $50 billion from the time I was a staffer. When I left the legislature, at that time, Chief of Staff to Paul Krikorian, when he was in the Assembly. He left in 2009, went to City Hall in 2010, end of 2009, early 2010. The state budget in 2009 was roughly $100 billion, but because of the worsening economic circumstance, it had a hole of $20 billion, 20%, dropped down to $80 billion. And all we could do was continuously just make cuts in unprotected services. A lot of different programs, a lot of programs in health and well, not health necessarily, education and prisons and several other areas are protected. But the more vulnerable communities do not have their funding protected. And so what ends up happening, anytime there's cuts, the first ones to get cut are disabled communities, aging communities, and developmentally disabled communities as well. The hardest of the communities that we need to make sure we're providing the safety net for get cut first, because there's no protections. So coming from a climate like that, the economy started improving. We ended up reaching up to roughly about 155 billion in 2013 when I first voted on it. By the time I left the legislature last year, it was a $300 billion budget. So you can't even hire enough people to be able to fill up slots. So what you do is instead is backfill a lot of programs that have been underfunded for a very long time, with the understanding that at some point we're not going to be able to continue financing those programs at the rate that we were financing. So we also build up reserves. In the last 10 years, we in the legislature put forward 3 different type of reserve programs to put behind at least about $35 billion in reserves for the rainy day purposes. Without getting into too many of those details, I'm happy to answer more questions about that if there are, but that's a pretty significant investment, more than 10% investment. Usually reserves for local jurisdictions or at the state level are only required to be between 1 to 3%. So having a 10%, 11% reserve is a pretty significant investment. And the goal even this year, as I'm listening to, as I heard a little while ago about the 31 billion deficit that we have, that was mentioned. The governor and the legislature tried to absorb that without actually utilizing the rainy day reserve funds, because there are going to be more anticipated cuts in the future, and what you want to do is make sure you're keeping those reserves for an actual bad time where jobs can be cut and where vital services can be taken away. So one point that I want to share with all of you, I'm going to talk about 3 things that I think we need to look for. One is on the political front, one is the budget, and one is on policy side. On the budget side, we can't have the budget mechanism in place that we've had all this time. It's a very difficult process to change, but literally how state is a feast or famine mechanism. Years that the stock market is doing well and our capital gains are coming in, we have a lot of money, and so we're able to backfill the programs that have been cut or underfunded. Years that the stock market is not doing well and we don't have capital gains coming in, then it's bare bones, and we're relying on primarily all the other taxes that you know, retail tax, income tax, property tax, and several other fees in place. That's not really a way to govern long-term, because you don't really know what's gonna happen, or you become very dependent on the market. And that eventually is gonna hurt California. For the foreseeable future, it's not, because the tendencies of the market is always to go up and down. And generally, we've seen it, the trend always is that it's gonna go up eventually, as the markets have. But when you're making it so dependent on capital gains, you are also creating a structure where a portion of the taxes are coming from literally 500 families in the entire state. And this is the scary part, because roughly about a quarter of the state's budget is dependent on the taxes that are paid through capital gains and other wealth tax programs on literally about less than 1,000 families. Now, these families are not going to get up and leave, so there's not that fear. These are invested individuals who have had their businesses in the area for decades, so they're vested. But long-term thinking, that's not what you want your revenue projection to be based on. That a significant portion of your funding is gonna, a quarter of your funding is gonna come from a select group of individuals. You want to diversify that portfolio. In order to diversify that portfolio, you gotta make sure that the middle class is thriving and doing well so that they can continue paying the taxes in order to be able to pay for the services that are necessary. So that comes the second point, which is making sure that we continue making investments in the middle class. You know, a lot of folks that moved to the San Fernando Valley, a lot of folks that moved to California always had this aspiration that they can go to a good college at a relatively affordable price, very affordable price. And I myself, when I went to college 30 years ago, I was able to pay it off, whatever debt I had, within 3 years. My kids won't be able to do that. No one now is able to do that. Nowadays, you come out with a mortgage for your college, let alone then to think about putting down a mortgage, a down payment for your house or a investment property, whether you're living in it or utilizing for some form of residence for yourself. So that's for the budget. When it comes to political, I gotta tell you, two things that I think have been devastating us. And you've heard me say this before, but now that I'm not in office, I have to share this with all of you, because these are things that I'm gonna continue working on. Term limits is gonna destroy the state. I gotta tell you, I've served for 10 years. It was in my 5th year that I really became effective, because no one held my hand. When I got elected, it's not as if the speaker and leadership were welcoming me to come in. They made it challenging for me, in fact, because there were other folks ahead of me that they were gonna cater to. So I needed to throw my elbows around and figure things out and get to a place where not only do I know where the bathroom is, but I know who to exactly call to make sure that if I'm looking for a little bit of funding for a certain program that's benefiting my district, or the aging in my district, or youth programs, I know where to get it done, or how to maneuver it. Or in the next budget cycle, which pot of money to utilize, or where to put money in which program in order to be able to then utilize it in the district. All of that takes a little bit of time, in order to be able to craft. So what term limits does is the minute you're effective at doing something, you're no longer there. And it's just one of the most arcane things, bizarre things that was sold to us as voters. And you think about it as, what kind of a doctor, what kind of a surgeon do you want to go to? A surgeon that just graduated from college, medical school, yesterday? Or are you going to do research and know who the most talented individual is who has performed hundreds of thousands even of the specific procedure that you need done, and then go and consult that individual after several meetings, gain enough confidence to go and have the surgery performed by that individual? But imagine you show up on the day of the surgery and they say, sorry, this guy's been termed out. He no longer conducts these surgeries. But we have someone from UCLA, brand spanking new. He's fantastic. That's not going to evoke confidence in you. It's great that the person has graduated top student, but if they haven't had the practical experience of knowing how the human body works because of repetition in their work, gaining that expertise, the art of the work, they're not going to know how to deal with it. They're not going to be as effective with the surgery. And it could lead to complications. So term limits is critical. And the other reason why term limits is critical is because the game is now set. You know what the formula is. With so much fundraising happening, with so much independent expenditures, I gotta tell you, this next election cycle, you are gonna see so many independent expenditure dollars being spent, especially, by the way, in LA City elections. The number of conversations that I'm having, the fact that in order to run for city council, maximum contribution is $900. You need to, and city council, as you all know, roughly 260 to 270,000 population. State assembly, roughly about 500,000 population. In the assembly, the maximum contribution I was able to receive when I was still in office was $4,900. By the way, it's increased to $5,500 now. One person per election can give $5,500. City council, half the size of an assembly seat, $900. What is that going to do? I'm not advocating for increasing the limits, but what I'm trying to get at is it takes so much more work to raise $900 at a time to be able to do the number of mailers that you need to get out your name and your ideas to voters, that independent expenditures know that. The committees and PACs that are set up will just swoop in and put in $200,000-300,000. Because for major wealth management companies or developers or whoever else that has an interest, that's not a lot of money. That's a bargain, given that they can help elect someone that's going to be favorable to their issues. So we have to be very pragmatic as residents, as constituents, as activists, to understand that we can't do much, unfortunately, right now about independent expenditures because it's a United States Supreme Court protected issue at this point. But we need to figure out how to address that. We need to make sure that our federal representatives are constantly attacking that issue and figuring out ways to bring it back to the court. Obviously, the court needs to also change in order for it to have a more favorable outcome in protecting democracy and making sure that independent expenditures don't have the same ability to buy elections. And then once that's addressed, then we can figure out what the reasonable limitation is on fundraising. It shouldn't be $5,500, and $900 can be a little daunting as well. But so long as there's a standard playing field, and you're not dealing with independent expenditures, it can even be $300. Whatever it is, it at least allows you as a candidate to figure out ways of being very effective at raising money, as opposed to having independent expenditures do the speaking for you. I don't want to go on too long, So I'm going to finish off by saying several points, and then I'd rather actually us have a back and forth conversation. I talked about, last one, I talked about a little bit about budget, about the political, on the policy end. Due to term limits, I'm just going to give you one example. There's so many things to talk about, but I'm going to give you one example. Because of term limits, what ends up happening is once someone is elected to office, they try to impress their constituency by doing as many pieces of legislation as possible. I will do legislation on water to tell you how much I care about the water issues. I'm going to do it on transportation. I'm going to do it on housing. I'm going to do it on homelessness. I'm going to do it on public safety, so that I cover a myriad of issues so that I can tell you that I'm doing the work for you. At the end of the day, not all these bills are going to pass. And quite frankly, the ones that do pass get watered down. Instead, what we should want, is our elected representatives to focus on 2 to 3 areas and become very good at it. When I first ran, the 2 areas that I really wanted to focus on were transportation and water. Because if you think about those 2 components and what LA is, the LA basin is, if those 2 are not addressed into the future, we are going to be paying an extremely high price. Lack of good public transportation is going to lead to people not wanting to be here anymore because the congestion is going to devastate us. And being someone who's I grew up in the West Valley where my family house is still in Winnetka. Traversing to the East Valley back in the late 80s or early 90s would take literally about 15 minutes. The 405 divide was not real at that time, but it's become overwhelmingly real. Now it takes 30 minutes to get by. Even on the freeway, it takes 20 to 25 minutes. So that does not help our quality of living, our standards of living. 2, water. When we turn on the faucet, we take it for granted because it runs. But the reality is, only 9% of our water comes from our underground aquifers. Only 9%. So if something devastating happens, one earthquake, one seismic activity that destroys any segment of the aqueduct, or anything happens to our water coming in from Colorado, we're going to be hurting because we're then going to be dependent on new contracts and negotiations. And we're going to be negotiating from a position of weakness rather than a position of strength. So it's critical that we pay attention to some of these long-term important issues. Homelessness is critical and it's a crisis. We need to address it. But we are going to work on homelessness and get it addressed because finally it's at our doorstep, and now as a society we're paying attention to it. We've had homelessness for over 50 years. We really weren't honestly addressing the issue because it was hidden in the outskirts of downtown. It was hidden in buildings that were vacated for decades. Now that the issue got pushed out into our front lawns, we started finally paying attention to it. So it's a both government issue, but government is a reflection of society. And society hasn't really been fair about that issue, hasn't really addressed it well. So I just want to leave with 3 key components also about what to invest in our future. One is community connections matters. The reason why I got a chance to be elected to serve you was because when I first ran, I had the endorsement of Richard Close, Jules Spear, multiple different individuals in this room who supported me and backed me up. I had and by the way, as a first-time candidate, I raised $350,000, and I thought that was a lot of money. It was. It is. Still is. But I got dwarfed by a candidate who ended up spending $2.5 million. $500,000 he raised, and another another $1.9 million he received in independent expenditures. The independent expenditure in his behalf spent $400,000, more than what I had raised in the entirety of that campaign, just in the last 2 weeks attacking me. The only reason I was able to overcome that was because of my connections with individuals. So that does matter, and it's important for us to pay attention to the candidates that are running. By the way, I don't need to repeat the fact that in the last 4 years, we've had 20% of our council members in LA City Council be indicted. I'm not even counting this fourth one because this fourth one, certain questionable issues with the indictment. But let's focus on the 3 that have gone through convictions. That's saying a lot. 20%, 3 out of 15 is a pretty significant number. 2, investing in the future. If we don't provide enough mentorship programs, if we don't provide enough programs like CalKids, the only reason I benefited and I'm standing before you is because others invested in me. So it's critical for us to make sure that children in our community get a fair shot at college education. So the program that Matt was talking about that I put together, I worked on for 7 years. Governor Jerry Brown was not too interested in it, so he gave me $3 million the first time I requested money for it. And he said, go create a program and see how many kids will actually enroll. It wasn't until Governor Newsom came into office, he really loved the idea and he backed it up with $50 million his first year. And then when we got a lot of federal funding, he put in $1.8 billion to make sure every child born in California is gonna have a college fund to their name. And it incentivizes the parents or loved ones or guardians to further invest more and get incentives. Last but not least, integrity counts. So your engagement and your involvement is critical to making sure that that integrity works. So I'll stop there. I've already talked too much. Let's go have it with questions.
Sit down, relax. Now the hot seat. No, just kidding. So you talked about the state or your vision investing in the middle class. You think that's an important thing. On a pass-fail basis, as far as the state goes, the state the last 2 years in a row has had a decline in population. More people are moving out of the state than are moving in. Businesses, big businesses, are moving out of the state. The folks that you talk about, the capital gains, people, if they can move out because of being overtaxed, they are moving out. Tesla moved big facilities to Texas. Apple moved big facilities to Texas. So investing in middle class, most of the folks in this room, most of the folks I know in Sherman Oaks, and I've spent my entire lifetime in Sherman Oaks, are middle of the road voters. They are either Democrats or Republicans, but they're middle of the road. They're not the extreme righties or they're not the extreme lefties. They're middle of the road. And there's a lot of middle class people that work really, really hard to do exactly what you said, put their kids in college, buy a home, invest in their community. But they see folks in Sacramento investing in social services more than they're investing in the middle class, investing in sanctuary state programs, investing, I don't even want to use that word, spending money in homeless programs that are failing. You can't build enough homes to solve the problem. There's other things that are involved in the homeless thing. So on a pass-fail basis, as far as on a go-forward basis, what do you see, knowing what you do know coming from Sacramento, on the state of California the next 2, 3, 4 years? You're not going to have tax revenues from, like you said, capital gains. You're not going to have the tax revenues from property taxes like you have in the past, because transfer taxes is a big part of it. Home sales are way down in California, and they have been the last 2 years. So, so tell me what you think the future crystal ball next year, 2 years, as far as the fiscal stability of California is.
If anyone could tell you what was going to be happening over the course of at least the last 3 years, they'd be billionaires by now, because they would have won every type of bet. I mean, who would have thought that we'd be going through a global pandemic, yet the housing prices would be soaring, or that there would be more money being continuously printed And there's just an amazing abundance of money in people's hands, which is causing the inflation. So, you know, who would have known some of these things?
But hold on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you are correct. There was trillions of dollars printed. And in California, the state, the government has had more money than it had before COVID. So, but it's gone. It's the unemployment checks that went out, that the governor said he was going to get all that money back, that went out fraudulently. What was that, $300 billion, $400 billion? 40 billion. I think it was a little bit more than 40 billion? Okay. So $40 billion. How much? A lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of programs. It's a lot of beds that can be done. That hasn't been talked about for a year and a half.
Well, let's stick to a few things that you said, because the first question was already pretty packed. You were talking about declining numbers, right? Okay. We all can have our opinions about this, and sometimes, unfortunately, our opinions are heavily led by news media outlets that we might be listening to. That's why it's important for us to listen to multiple different types of news services and cull from each one what we think, piece it together and verify with one another, okay? Reason I say that is because really what the decline in population in California was two things. Childbirth has gone down. At the height of childbirth in California in 2000, 2001, 2002, we were almost at 700,000 childbirths a year in this state. Do you want to take a guess where we're at with childbirth right now? Less than 500,000. It's about 480,000. That's a significant drop, by the way. For a wealthy state that's got the fifth largest economy in the world, tells you the reluctance people have in wanting to have more kids, which, by the way, is going to have amplified impacts on workforce in another 20 years, 30 years' time. So these are real issues that we need to be mindful of right now. By the way, the reason why I know these numbers is because of the Cal Kids program. Because I was trying to figure out, given the trends of childbirths we have, what is that dollar number that we need to invest in the state so that we can have a sustainable program, at least for the next 20 years. And once the program runs for 20 years and it's a success, it's never going to go away, because more and more parents are going to want to invest in programs coming through the state to make sure that their kids are going to college. Two, again, I'm not trying to make this partisan here, but the reality is when in 2016, President Trump was elected, migration stopped. We relied heavily on migration coming in and doing a lot of the labor work in California. You can disagree with me, but that is the reality of what our labor force demands. So with those two things, with declining childbirth and migratory patterns stopping or coming to a halt, it impacted our population in the state. So over time, it started declining. I suspect it's going to go back up again, but the reality is it's not going to go back until we're building more housing, market rate housing, not just affordable, but market rate housing, so that there's enough supply of housing units in the market so that the equilibrium of the price stabilizes. It's a simple demand and supply function. If you provide enough supply, you're going to have the prices come down. Right now, arbitrarily, the prices are being kept up.
Okay.
There's actually a lot more, but
I know. I could go. We could have this all night. Okay, Maria Calvin, you've got a couple questions that you sent in. Do you want to ask them yourself, or do you want me to ask them for you?
I didn't actually bring mine.
Okay, so I'll ask them for you. So her first question is, it seems that our state legislators are casting votes on bills to align with party leadership and powerful special interest groups, agendas rather than reflecting their constituents' needs and concerns. Is there a way to change that culture in Sacramento?
Vote. Vote and participate. You know, That's why I was talking about one of the points I made earlier, community connections. You know, how many other places have you had candidates running and being outspent 7-1 and being able to defeat the odds and winning and overcoming that kind of money? Doesn't happen a lot. But it happened in this district 11 years ago because of the community connections that we had. And that's why it's critical for us to be very participatory and get engaged. And by the way, the other thing is, let's be honest, there's always agendas. There's always been agendas for decades and centuries. I mean, even John Adams and Jefferson talked about how they were concerned about the influence of special interests when they were working on the Constitution. This has been something that, you know, if you want to have a laissez-faire system and be able to have the market drive, you're always going to be worried about independent organizations becoming too powerful in that marketplace and driving the agenda towards the direction they want. It's just human nature. So in order to offset that, we just need to be very vigilant and be engaged. It doesn't help, though, when the Supreme Court allows independent expenditures to take hold. That's something that we've failed at as government, and that needs to change.
So let me ask you something, because I agree with you as far as term limits are a problem. I agree with you. I was for term limits years and years ago because when we had some of our electeds in there for so long that no incumbent could ever stand a chance of beating them. So, but there's that mix, and I've had conversations with a few people in this room about that, as far as there's that a double-edged sword as far as, you know, the independent expenditures, but there's also campaign, you know, a lot of campaign reform that has been introduced that's out there. So would you be in favor of term limits, kind of a follow-up on Maria, term limits along with campaign reform acts?
I think the best term limits is every 2 years. If you're in the state legislature, if you're in the state assembly, you're running every 2 years.
No, just as far as for all office, as far as campaign reform and as well as.
So we have a very discriminatory program in all of this, right? In LA City Council, you have 3 term limits. In County Supervisor, you have 3 term limits. In the Assembly, you have 6 terms. In the State Senate, you have 4 terms. And then in the federal government, you have nothing.
Right.
So you've basically now created a structure where you're going to try to run for the seat that's going to give you the most name exposure, so that then you run for the seat that has unlimited opportunity to serve. Okay, well, that's a pretty easy formula. Everyone's going to try to do that. So that doesn't necessarily help the voters, the institution, or good long-term decision making. So, you know, if you're going to have term limits, which I think elections should serve as that, but you just need to continue making sure that the voters are informed so that they participate and vote. If you're going to force some form of a term limit, it has to be at least a generational impact. It needs to be at least for 20 years or something where once that person gains expertise in how to manage, how to deliver for their constituency, how to effectively push forward for policy, that they are able to be effective in doing it for some time. I mean, you look at congressional names or US Senate names, you know, whether you love him or hate him, Lindsey Graham, he didn't become successful in his first term. He's been in office for 30 years. Biden didn't become Biden just because he served 2 terms. He's been in Senate since he was 28 years old. He's been in office he was in the Senate for 40 years. That cultivates you know, the capability to do things and to move things.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience before I go on with the ones that were emailed in? Yes, sir. Jay, stand up.
You were speaking about campaign reform and financing and leveling of the playing field and referencing the Supreme Court. I assume you're talking about Citizens United.
Yes.
Do you believe that number one, legislatively, that can be dealt with in light of the Supreme Court decision? And if so, who in the world is out there trying to pass such a reform? Because those people who are in power do not want the reform.
Yeah. It's so divided that I don't see it happening legislatively at the federal level, unless if there's a miracle of some sort. So what it's going to have to happen is it's going to have to rise up through court challenges. So it either comes up at a state level or at a, it comes up at a state level, and it eventually gets challenged so many times and appealed so that it makes its way to the Supreme Court. And that's why I was saying, unfortunately, this Supreme Court will not, turn it over at this point. So we're going to have to wait until this Supreme Court changes, so that that's why, again, these things are so complicated and complex and take such a long time, and it has overwhelming generational impact. So by the time it even changes, it's going to have had severe damage in a lot of areas of the state. This is not meant to be a doom and gloom conversation, but this is just the reality of, redistricting matters. Redistricting sets policy for the next generation, because the way the district lines get redrawn and who then gets elected has an impact for the next 20, 30 years, because those policies that get passed for that duration of 10 years and take hold and aren't turned over will continue into generations to come. So these things really have significant impact.
Okay, Bob Anderson wants to know, what power does a California senator or assembly member have over a county organization like Metro?
So look, you got multiple different avenues. Sometimes even if you don't have the power to do something, because even if you introduce legislation, it's going to be killed because the leadership won't allow, let's say, legislation like that to move forward. There's other ways of doing it. You look at JLAC, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, the very little known committee that I would take full advantage of. Every time I didn't like something and I knew if I introduced it as legislation and the speaker or leadership at the time would not support that idea, and so the bill would get held in Appropriations Committee. That's where all bills go to die, by the way, appropriations, because we can't finance it. What ends up happening is you try it once, you try it 2 times, you're not going to keep banging your head at the wall. Then I would come up with something creative. I would try to do it administratively, or I would try to go do it through Joint Legislative Audit Committee and have that issue be audited. The audit comes out a year later, then depending on the audit findings, and you can, by the way, it's up to you how you want the audit to happen. So you can tailor it exactly the way you want. Or you can work with experts to figure out what questions to ask so that you're allowing the State Bureau of Auditor to go in and be able to delve into the issue. And by the way, the state auditor also has subpoena powers, so they can actually cut through certain tape that other agencies might not be able to. So you come up with crafty ways like that to figure out how to advance your issue.
Okay, this is from Anonymous, so if you're here, raise your hand. No, they want to know, they were talking about, they've heard that you're running for city council in Krikorian's seat. They want to know, the election's February 24, right? March 24. So, and when is the deadline for turning in your intention to as a candidate?
To focus on?
To announce that somebody's going to be a candidate.
So you can announce whenever you want. The reality is the way things work.
What's the deadline?
It's December.
December, okay. So they want, their question is, who is your competition? Who's already put their hat in the ring?
So
Sorry, that's why it was hard to answer that question, because until the time people actually don't collect 500 signatures and qualify for the ballot, it's really not that real. So, I mean, because there's been candidates who have raised $1 million, they couldn't get 500 signatures, and so they would fail to qualify for the ballot. Or you'll have folks that don't raise any money, but they're great at collecting signatures. Well, it's great, they're on the ballot, but if they don't have enough resources to be able to communicate with voters, they're not really going to be able to have their message and voice heard in the district. So it's not real until two things happen. Unfortunately, modern day campaigning, what has transpired over time is the only way people really judge whether or not you are a viable candidate is by how much money you raise. That's become the medium of, the preferred medium of looking at whether you're a viable candidate or not. It's not about your ideas, unfortunately. It's not about your experience or your capability. It's about whether or not you can raise enough money to send enough of those colorful brochures in order to get your name heard a certain number of times. That's what it comes down to. So it's important for candidates who have good ideas or strong credentials to also be able to know how to fundraise. And the city has a matching fund program that allows you to get up to 5 times per a LA City contributor in order to be able to compete with heavily funded or financed candidates. So right now there are a total of 5 candidates in this race, but again, it's not real until you see some of these parameters being met and everyone filing and qualifying.
Any of them real contenders?
I always look at everyone as a real contender because that makes me work harder.
Okay. So stay tuned on that. Okay, so we're gonna have one other question, but before I give the one last question, I want to let you all know, July, we're dark, we're not here. So we have to give Jules 1 month off so that he can go ahead and get his energy going and get us more restaurants for the balance of the year. Thank you, Jules. So July, we will not be, every July we do not have a meeting. So just, you guys, you're gonna have to wait till August. August, we have a great speaker. We have some great speakers for the second half of the year. So make sure you mark your calendars the 3rd Wednesday of every month, except for July and except for December, okay? So also before you leave, if you could please leave as quickly as you can so we can get the room cleared, because we have to be out of here by 9. I mean, if you want to linger to hang out with him, just go over to the side. He says he'll be here till 10 or 11 o'clock. And if you could please take your garbage and put it in the garbage can, that will help Jules because he has to do all the cleanup.
One final thought.
Oh, hold on, I've got another question.
One final thought.
Yes, sir.
Is this the closing comment?
There's no closing comments, but I've got a closing question.
You have a closing question?
I've got one more question.
Sure, but then I want to make a closing comment after the question.
Should we give him a closing comment?
Yes.
All right. So this is also from Maria Calvin. She's in charge of our legislative committee. Obviously, that's why she's asking all these wonderful questions. So RENA, which is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, allocations that mandate how much zoning each city must provide under concerns about accuracy. And the state audit validates those concerns. Yet, Sacramento refused to reevaluate RENA's numbers. Why is Sacramento so unwilling to have those numbers validated by an impartial auditor? Doesn't it make sense that the numbers we base all of our housing legislation on should have the data that is undisputed?
So we can go back and forth on this, but the reality is there's a sense of frustration in Sacramento that no matter what they've tried to do, what incentives they've put forward, there are many jurisdictions who do not provide enough housing in order to stabilize the housing price. So because of that, certain stretched outcomes were pursued, some of which I ended up not supporting. I actually supported many of the programs, but I didn't believe that building the ability to build a 10-unit structure in a single-family community actually works. I don't think subdividing homes is going to be something that every homeowner is going to jump at doing. In my humble view, that was a gift to a lot of wealth management companies that are sitting on thousands of properties in the San Fernando Valley when people lost their homes in foreclosures back in 2009, 10, and 11. And the banks didn't want to go through the auction process, so with large swaths, they just turned it over to management companies at a discount. So what happened? These companies, the smartest investment. It's like a stock. It exactly was like a stock market. You buy a stock, and what benefit does a stock give? Two benefits. It rises over time, and it pays you quarterly dividends. Okay, same thing happened with this. You buy the house unit at a very low price, $600,000 from the bank, where the previous owner had paid, let's say, $900,000 or $700,000, whatever it was, at a discount. So you know it has the propensity to grow over time, and grow it has over the course of the last 10 years, 13 years. But at the same time, you're turning around and collecting rent on it too. So it's been a phenomenal investment for certain owners among others. So it's important for us to create more housing. We need to stabilize the market. No, we really need to. We need to provide affordable housing, but we also need market rate housing. And by the way, I've never been one to really support decimating single-family homes, but there are opportunities along Van Nuys Boulevard, along Victory Boulevard, major corridors, major arteries in the valley that can sustain having 4 or 5 stories go up, retail at the bottom, and then come up with creative zoning planning where, you know, one more level is given to potentially office use, or it could be converted between office and residential, so that it's like an accordion. When the need is there, you provide residential, but when the demand goes up for office space, you can provide more office space. So we need to be looking at ways of making sure we're providing more housing units and make sure that it's also complemented, by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this earlier, by good transportation. Transportation is half of the problem of our housing shortages. Because when you look at the 5 freeway every morning and you see the stream of white lights coming starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, coming into LA, and that stream at 4 or 5 p.m. the red stream going up, leaving LA, that tells you that people who are the service providers in Los Angeles can't even afford to live here. And so they need to drive an hour and a half back and forth each day, each way, every day. Which means, by the way, the impact on their quality of life with their kids. These are parents who are not spending 3 hours at home helping with preparing food, doing homework, providing supervision, whatever else that's required as a parent to do. So these are, and then these become very real issues down the line. So, is that the last question? I just want to say, I started by saying thank you for the opportunity to serve for 10 years, but this really has a deeper meaning for me. You're waving.
Yes, I'll have a question.
Sorry, I asked for questions earlier. We're at closing. Why don't you stick around afterwards? He'll stick around.
Happy to talk to you afterwards.
I thought maybe everyone might hear the answer, but all right.
I'm sorry?
I thought everyone might want to hear the answer.
What's the question?
You're running for a recording seat. He's turning out. As of right now, when a lot of homeowners, property owners go to get public comment, recording allows the council members to kind of stand up and give chit chat and not really pay attention to the homeowners give comment. A lot of them leave really distraught and kind of feeling unheard. Are you willing to make a commitment today, if you take that seat, to make sure and encourage the council members to sit in their seats and
Are you talking about at a committee hearing or, oh, at the public comment hearing? I take my job very seriously, and so the only time when I was in the legislature, you can judge me by already what I've done for 10 years, right? How I've cast my votes. I probably have over 10,000 votes. I've served on multiple committees every year, so you could see in those committees where I was absent, where I was not. You take your job, I've always taken my job very seriously, and part of the job is to listen, because if I'm gonna represent, I can't just lead without looking back and seeing if I actually have the consensus of the support of people behind me. So I do commit to you to listen, but I gotta tell you also one thing. When I hear people throw the F-bomb constantly, at some point, what is there to listen to? You know, so we're having an honest conversation. I understand people's frustration, but that's why my office is there, so that they can come in and talk to me. So I'm happy to talk to you even more about this. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity that you've given me to serve, and this is coming from a deeper place than just to say thank you. As an immigrant who came here at the age of 10, not speaking the English language, I'm sorry, not age of 10, age of 8, not speaking the English language, and having the opportunity to actually benefit from our public institutions, graduate from one of the best institutions, and then to be able to actually have public trust in working for different elected officials, but on top of that, to actually be able to run for office with your support, I can't tell you what gratitude I feel and how honored I am and how blessed I feel. So thank you very much for giving this immigrant kid that opportunity to serve you, and look forward to working with you in whatever capacity I may be and whatever the future brings. Thank you all.